She was just a girl from a quiet village, where dreams were often left behind in the dust. Her real father had passed away when she was young, and her mother remarried a man who never saw her as his own. Life wasn't kind, not in the way she needed. Her home wasn't filled with encouragement or love. Instead, it was full of silence, chores, and the constant feeling that she didn't belong. Her stepfather, always distant, treated her victories like they were nothing. Every time she brought home a good grade or a school award, he'd look the other way, muttering, "Books don't cook food." But the girl kept going. When everyone doubted her, she believed in herself. She'd study late at night by candlelight after finishing all the housework. Her clothes were old, but her dreams were big. Even when her stepfather tried to crush her spirit with harsh words, she didn't let it stop her. She learned to smile through pain and kept walking forward, step by step. Teachers saw her brilliance. Friends admired her focus. But at home, her victories were met with silence, or worse, jealousy. Her stepfather saw her rising, and instead of pride, he felt small. He didn't want to be the man in the background while a girl, his stepdaughter, stood in the spotlight. And so, he began to resent her even more. Still, she kept going, not because it was easy, but because deep down, she knew she had to. She was more than what her home told her she was. Her story was just beginning. And even though she didn't know it yet, the whole world was about to witness her strength. And the very person who tried to dim her light would soon be standing in the shadow of her glow. Her stepfather never looked at her the way a real father should. From the very beginning, there was always a gap, an invisible wall between them. He had married her mother, but never really accepted the girl as his own. At first, he pretended to care. In front of neighbors, he would smile and say, "She's like my own daughter." But behind closed doors, his tone was cold. His eyes didn't show warmth. Every time she tried to get close, he'd pull away, leaving her confused and hurt. As she grew older, she started achieving things many thought were impossible. She was smart, dedicated, and quietly strong. Her teachers would send notes home, praising her. She'd win awards, top her class, and come back excited to share the news. But instead of congratulations, she'd get silence. Or worse, a bitter comment like, "Let's see how far this book stuff takes you." At first, she thought he was just tired or stressed, but slowly, she began to see the truth. He wasn't proud of her. He was angry. Every time she succeeded, it reminded him of what he hadn't achieved in his own life. She was becoming something big, something respected, and deep down, it made him feel small. His job wasn't impressive. His days were the same, and his past was filled with missed chances. Watching her rise felt like a spotlight was shining on his failures. He wouldn't say it out loud, but his actions told the story. He started making small, cutting remarks. He'd tell her not to get too full of herself. He'd mock her when she spoke English at home. Sometimes, he'd even tell her mother that the girl was acting like she was better than the family. But the truth was, he was scared. Scared of being left behind. Scared that one day, she'd become someone the world celebrated, and he'd still just be the man in the background, bitter and forgotten. In public, he still wore the mask. At community events or school ceremonies, he'd clap lightly and stand beside her for pictures. He played the role of the supportive father, but inside, he was boiling. His resentment grew with each medal she won, each compliment she received. He couldn't understand how a girl who wasn't his blood could be rising so high, while he felt so stuck. He didn't realize that his bitterness showed, even when he tried to hide it. People noticed. Teachers noticed. Even his own friends would say, "You must be proud." And his forced smile always seemed just a little too tight. The girl noticed too. She stopped trying to impress him. She stopped seeking his praise. She knew now that no matter how high she climbed, he would always see her as a reminder, not of her success, but of his own failure. And that quiet resentment inside him was building, slowly, waiting for the moment it would finally explode. The day she had dreamed of for years had finally come. She was chosen as the top student of her class, not just for her grades, but for her strength, her leadership, and her story. She was the girl everyone talked about, the one who had come from so little and still managed to shine. Her name was printed on the graduation program, right under the title, Guest Student Speaker. She held that paper in her hand and smiled, but deep inside, she wished one person would say he was proud. Her stepfather didn't. As the news spread through the neighborhood, People were filled with excitement. "She's going to speak at graduation," they said. "She's the pride of our community." Aunties came over to help her pick her dress. Her classmates cheered. Her teachers hugged her. Her mother, with tears in her eyes, said, "I always knew you'd do something special." But the man of the house, the one who was supposed to stand tallest with pride, stayed quiet. He sat on the couch that evening, staring at the TV, pretending not to hear the joy around him. When someone called and said, "You must be so proud of your daughter," he forced a chuckle. "Yes, she's doing okay," he replied flatly. But inside, his jealousy was burning. Every compliment she received felt like a slap to him. Every praise, every kind word about her made him feel like less of a man. He had done nothing special in life, and now everyone was looking at her, not him. At the graduation ceremony, people came dressed in their best clothes. The hall was packed. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. Phones were out. Cameras were flashing. Her speech was powerful. Simple words from a girl who had walked through fire and still chose kindness. Her voice didn't shake. She looked out into the sea of faces and felt something she had never felt before. Seen, respected, free. And yet, sitting there in the crowd, her stepfather didn't clap. His hands stayed in his lap. He wore a stiff smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. He looked around, seeing how people admired her, and it made his stomach twist. He heard someone whisper, "She's going to go far," and he bit his tongue. He couldn't understand how the girl he once ignored had become the one everyone loved. She didn't need his approval anymore. She had earned something far greater, the love of her community, the respect of strangers, and a strength that even his resentment couldn't touch. She sat back down, glowing, unaware of the storm brewing behind that cold smile of his. But deep inside, she knew something had changed. She didn't need to hear, "I'm proud of you," from a man who never believed in her. Her triumph didn't need noise. It didn't need claps from every corner. It was a silent triumph, and it was more powerful than any words he could have said. The day of the graduation ceremony had finally come. The school grounds were crowded with students, parents, teachers, and neighbors. Everyone had gathered to witness the moment they had waited for all year. Families sat close together, whispering with excitement, holding flowers and gifts for their children. Laughter, camera clicks, and happy voices filled the space. Every seat was taken, and more people stood in the back just to catch a glimpse of the event. One by one, students were called to the stage. Each name brought polite claps, some cheers, and proud smiles from families. But when the announcer called out, "Nia Zuberi," everything changed. The crowd burst into loud applause. People stood up. Many cheered her name. Her classmates smiled, and even those who didn't know her well clapped with genuine excitement. She had become a symbol of strength in their eyes, a girl who never gave up, no matter how hard her life had been. She walked across the stage with her head high, her steps steady and full of pride. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply walked like someone who had earned every single clap she was getting. Her graduation gown fit her perfectly, and the medal around her neck shimmered as she moved. Her face showed calm, but inside, her heart was full. When she reached the front of the stage, a teacher came forward to speak. The teacher told everyone about Nia's journey, how she had faced many challenges at home, how she had studied late into the night, how she never missed school even when things were tough. The teacher said, "She didn't just pass her exams, she carried herself through storms. She's not just a graduate, she is a fighter." People in the crowd listened closely. Some nodded, some smiled, some wiped away tears. Everyone seemed to feel the same thing. This was more than just a celebration. It was a recognition of a young girl's courage. Nia looked out over the crowd and saw the faces of those who had supported her. Her mother, her teachers, her friends. And then she saw him, her stepfather. He was sitting still, his hands folded, face stiff. He didn't clap, he didn't smile. While everyone around him cheered, he just stared. Maybe he felt ignored. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he couldn't accept that the girl he once looked down on was now being lifted up by the whole community. But Nia didn't let that shake her. She stood tall, proud, and strong. The cheers weren't for his approval. They were for her story, for the strength she showed, for every time she chose to rise. And in that moment, she knew this was her day. Her voice, her effort, her success, they all mattered. Nothing could take that away from her. As she stood on the stage, her name echoed through the crowd once more. this time not just as a graduate, but as the top student of the year. The announcer's voice rang clear as she was called forward again to receive the highest academic honor. The crowd erupted. Her classmates cheered, teachers clapped with pride, and some even wiped away tears. This moment belonged to her, and everyone could feel it. One of her favorite teachers, who had guided her through the hardest days, stepped forward to present the award. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the medal around Nia's neck and whispered, "You did it." Tears glistened in the teacher's eyes, and for a second it felt like a private moment between just the two of them, even in front of hundreds. Then, a respected local official came to the stage. He looked out at the crowd and then at Nia. "This young lady," he said, "is not just the pride of this school. She is an example for our entire region. She has shown what hard work, determination, and courage can do. Let her story inspire every child and every parent sitting here today." The words stirred something powerful in the crowd. People stood up once again, this time not just to cheer, but to honor. They clapped in rhythm, chanting her name. "Nia! Nia! Nia!" The sound rolled through the field like a wave. Even strangers felt proud of her. Her mother wept silently in the front row, overwhelmed by the moment her daughter had dreamed of for years. Nia's face glowed. Her eyes were wide, her smile unshakable. As she held her certificate high, the crowd continued to cheer. She didn't wave to seek attention. She simply nodded, humbly, as if thanking them all for believing in her. She turned to walk off the stage, her heart full. Her steps were light, her shoulders straight. This was everything she had worked for, and she had done it with no shortcuts, no favors, just grit and grace. Her classmates reached out to high-five her as she passed, and even students from other schools in the audience whispered her name in admiration. For a moment, it felt like nothing could go wrong. The years of pain and being overlooked were behind her. Today, she was seen, she was celebrated, she was loved. But as she stepped off the platform and into the waiting crowd, she didn't notice one face that wasn't smiling. The face of the man who had never clapped. The man who stayed seated while everyone else stood. Her stepfather watched with cold eyes, his hands clenched. Nia didn't see it. She was still soaking in her moment of glory, unaware that something was coming, something that could steal the joy she had finally earned. Nia stepped off the stage with her heart full of pride and love. She looked around for her family, especially her mother, eager to share the biggest moment of her life. Her arms stretched open, ready for a warm embrace, her smile wide and eyes shining. This was supposed to be the happiest day she had ever lived, the reward for all her pain and hard work. The moment she spotted her family in the crowd, her steps quickened. Her mother had tears in her eyes, clearly overwhelmed with joy. Nia's little brother clapped with excitement, but the man standing next to them, her stepfather, wore no smile. Still, Nia didn't think much of it. She had hoped, maybe, just maybe, this moment would soften his heart. Maybe, after everything she had achieved, he would finally be proud. She moved toward them with confidence and love, arms still open when it happened. Without any warning, her stepfather's hand flew through the air and struck her across the face. A sharp, loud crack split the silence. Her graduation cap flew off her head and tumbled to the ground. The crowd froze. Some gasped. Others cried out. Her classmates stopped in their tracks. Time felt like it paused for a second. Nia's head turned sharply from the force. She staggered a step backward, her hand going to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. Tears didn't come right away from the pain. They came from something worse. Betrayal. The one moment she believed she had earned love, she was met with violence. Her eyes locked with his, confused and hurt. She didn't understand why. Why now? Why here? Her mother rushed forward, screaming at him. People in the crowd shouted in outrage. Someone yelled, "Did he just slap her?" Phones were pulled out. Cameras were already rolling. What should have been a private celebration turned into a public shock. Nia stood frozen. Her heart was breaking right in front of everyone, not just because she had been hit, but because she had believed he might change. She had held on to that tiny hope, and he crushed it in front of hundreds, in front of her teachers, her friends, her community. She had fought through so much: poverty, loneliness, rejection. She had stood tall in front of the world, believing she had finally earned her place. But the one person who should have clapped for her chose to humiliate her instead. The crowd didn't stay quiet for long. Whispers turned to yelling. Anger filled the air, and the man who tried to silence her light with one slap was now facing something he never expected, a crowd rising up, not for him, but for her. For a moment, everything stopped. It was like the world forgot how to move. No one spoke, no one breathed. The sound of the slaps still echoed in the air, and all eyes were locked on the scene. Nia stood still, her face red from the hit, her eyes filled with pain and confusion. Her graduation cap lay on the floor, untouched, like a symbol of everything that just went wrong. Her body trembled, but she didn't fall. She didn't run. She stood there, heartbroken and frozen. The crowd didn't know how to react at first, but then slowly the silence cracked. A woman in the back gasped loudly. Someone whispered, "Did he just slap her?" A few people stepped forward. The tension grew heavy, and the shock turned into something else. Anger. Murmurs turned into voices. Voices turned into shouts. "What's wrong with you?" one man shouted. "She's a child!" Another woman screamed. A few people ran toward Nia, shielding her like a wall. Others turned their phones on him, recording every second. Nia's mother pushed herself between them, yelling at her husband, her voice full of rage. How could you, on her big day, in front of everyone? But the man didn't respond. He looked around, clearly realizing that everyone was now against him. The pride he once protected had turned into public shame. People were surrounding him, asking questions, pointing fingers, calling him out. Dozens of phones were pointed at him now. His face would be everywhere within minutes. Social media would know his name before he could even leave the ceremony. This wasn't just a slap anymore. This was a scandal, a moment that everyone in the community would talk about for years. The crowd's disbelief turned into unity, standing beside Nia, making it clear that they weren't going to stay silent. A teacher rushed to Nia, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Another wrapped a gown around her, trying to give her some comfort, some warmth. Nia tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She wasn't just hurting from the slap. She was hurting from everything it stood for, all the years of silence, all the times she was made to feel small, all the pain she buried just to succeed. Now it was all out in the open. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew. And as the crowd turned its energy toward protecting her, standing by her side, Nia realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. The same people who clapped for her moments ago were now defending her. The same community that cheered her name was now fighting for her dignity. What started as a moment of pain had just become a moment of power. Before Nia could even process what had just happened, a woman from the crowd rushed forward and stood in front of her like a shield. She didn't hesitate. She held Nia close and looked directly at the man who had just slapped her. "Not today," she said firmly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not in front of all of us." Others quickly joined her, forming a protective circle around Nia, making sure she felt safe, seen, and supported. The noise grew louder. People were outraged. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. It had become a public moment that shook the whole event. Then, one of the respected community elders took the microphone on stage. His voice was firm, filled with both sadness and strength. "We gather today to celebrate our children," he said, "not to shame or harm them. What we just witnessed goes against everything we stand for." His words rang through the air, cutting through the noise, and many in the audience nodded, clapped, and cried. More elders stood up, one by one. They didn't stay silent. They spoke from the heart, not just for Nia, but for every child who had ever felt unloved, uncelebrated, or hurt by the very people who were supposed to lift them up. Their voices became the voice of the crowd, loud, honest, and powerful. Meanwhile, the man who struck Nia stood still, eyes darting around, realizing there was no escape from the judgment he now faced. A security guard walked calmly toward him, signaling him to step aside. The crowd roared in approval as the man was led away, not with violence, but with undeniable accountability. Cameras followed him, every step captured, every face turned toward him in disapproval. As he disappeared from view, the attention shifted back to Nia, but not in pity, in pride. People began chanting her name again, not because of her grades this time, but because of her courage, her strength, and the love she had inspired from a community that now stood behind her like never before. What was meant to be her special day almost turned into a nightmare, but the crowd made sure that didn't happen. Her stepfather thought he could humiliate her, silence her in front of everyone. Instead, he exposed himself, and the people made sure he felt that shame. That day, was no longer about him. It was about Nia, a young girl who fought for her dreams and unknowingly sparked something bigger. Her pain became her power, and the crowd made sure the world knew it. Nia stood still for a moment, her body shaking, eyes wet with tears, but her heart steady. The sting of the slap still burned on her skin, but what burned even stronger was the fire inside her, the one that had carried her through years of being ignored, overlooked, and doubted. The crowd was still buzzing, some people shouting, others watching silently, unsure of what would happen next. And then she did something no one expected. Slowly, Nia turned away from where her stepfather had been taken and began walking back toward the stage. Every step she took was filled with purpose. Her classmates and teachers watched in awe. This was not a broken girl. This was a girl rising right before their eyes. As she stepped back onto the stage, the entire crowd erupted. This time, the cheers were louder, stronger, and full of something deeper than celebration. They weren't just clapping for a top student. They were honoring her strength, her bravery, her spirit. People stood up again, some with their hands over their mouths, others with tears in their eyes. Everyone felt the weight of the moment. Nia walked to the microphone and stood tall. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't shake. Her voice was calm, but powerful. Every word clear, every word felt. She looked straight into the crowd and said, "We rise no matter who tries to push us down." The words hit everyone like thunder. There was silence for a heartbeat, and then applause exploded again, this time with people shouting her name, raising their hands, and nodding with pride. That simple sentence carried the story of her life and the truth of many others. It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration. In that moment, Nia wasn't just a graduate. She wasn't just a survivor of a public slap. She had become a symbol for every child who had ever felt small, for every girl who had ever been told she wasn't enough, for everyone who had been hurt but kept going. The way she stood, spoke, and smiled through the pain lit something in the hearts of the people there. Even her teachers, once tearing up at her success, now cried openly at her strength. This girl, who had every reason to break down, chose instead to rise up and speak truth. The chaos of the moment didn't break her, it built her. And as she stepped down from the stage once more, the cheers still ringing in her ears, everyone knew one thing for sure: Nia's story had just begun. The moment was captured on several phones. Within hours, the video of Nia being slapped on her graduation day was everywhere. People were shocked, outraged, and deeply moved. Her bravery in returning to the stage, speaking with grace and not letting pain break her spirit, touched millions. Social media flooded with her name. News channels picked up the story. Everyone was talking about the girl who stood tall when the world tried to push her down. Messages started pouring in from all over the country. People praised her courage and strength. They called her an inspiration. Some even said they saw their own pain in her story. Soon, a fundraiser was started to help support her college dreams. In just a few days, donations reached beyond anyone's expectations. Strangers who had never met her sent money, books, clothes, and words of encouragement. Nia had become a symbol of hope, not just in her village, but far beyond. Meanwhile, the man who tried to shame her faced a wave of public backlash. He lost the respect of the community. No one defended his actions. He had tried to silence her in front of the world, but it was him who ended up silenced. No one was willing to forget what he had done. As for Nia, she didn't let the past weigh her down. With her head high and a heart full of dreams, she moved forward. She stepped into her future not as a victim, but as a rising star. What was meant to break her had only made her stronger. And now, with the world watching, she was just getting started.